Good evening and welcome to a new edition of To The Point. This evening we'll continue with our discussion, the latest developments in the region. With us this evening is Dr. Cherif Amir, Professor of Geopolitics at the University of Paris. A pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
With the latest developments, the situation in Iraq. A statement recently by US President Donald Trump, he said, "We are not interested in the Middle East oil." And he said, should Baghdad want us to leave, they have to, and I'm quoting, cough up the billions of dollars that were spent on them in Iraq. Your comment?
Well, it's obvious that the Americans now are the masters of the game and what's taking place in the region, especially between Iraq and Iran, after the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Al-Quds force and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So things now are very clear. The Americans now, they are doing what they seem is suitable for them. We have seen the response of the Iranians was not really impressive. So now the Iraqis, who they unfortunately lost their sovereignty in every means, now if they ask the Americans to leave, that will make the Americans laugh aloud in front of all the international community,
yes,
telling the world that, well, okay, we could leave, but pay us. And this is the language that President Trump is using from the first day in office. So we're not surprised. I'm surprised that the Iraqis are now asking for the respect of their sovereignty from the beginning. Well, the Iraqi army had to deter the Shia militias belonging to Iran. Why Qasem Soleimani was there from the beginning, heading for some operations. The confrontation started between the Americans and the Iranian on the Iraqi soil.
Yes.
So I think now things have to be rearranged inside the Iraqi house. They have to decide if they want to stop the Americans from interfering in their affairs. They have to start with the Iranians. You cannot do it in the wrong way by asking the Iranians to take some responsibilities in the security of Iraq, and at the same time ask the Americans to leave. So I think that the Iraqi officials have to be responsible. They have to ask the Iranians and the Americans and the international community to protect their sovereignty and back off from Iraq. Well, we can see it now.
Isn't it mind-boggling? Because why is he referring to the oil? Why is he saying we're not interested in the Middle East oil? Why is this issue surfacing now?
Because from the beginning, everyone said that the Iraq war in 2003 was because of the oil, and the conflicts that we're seeing now is about the energy, the gas fields, the oil. We are seeing that the Americans now are controlling also the sources of oil in Syria, not only in Iraq. They have excellent relations with the Kurds in Erbil, where there are oil fields. So I think that he's giving a message that he's not interested anymore in what was the wealth in these countries. America got what they need. Now, if you want us to leave, okay, you have to pay us for it. So I think that the word oil is just a word that he's sticking this bomb in the face of the Iranians and the Gulf states, that if you think that we are there for that, well, we're not present for the oil. We can leave.
So why are they present if it's not for the oil?
Well,
right now, why are they there?
Of course, they are there for the oil, of course. And the second point is that, of course, there is now the Russians who are very present everywhere in the Middle East. They have strong allies, strong military presence, strong economic presence, and also excellent relations with countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the Emirates. So they are playing in what used to be the playground of the Americans in the Middle East. So I think that the Americans, they will make a grave mistake if they will leave now all these arenas for the Russians. So I think that behind all that is the fear of the Russian presence, because we all know also that the Iranians depend in all their force in the Russian force. The Iranians, they say, well, we were fighting against Daesh in Syria and Iraq. We all know that thanks to the Russians. So I think that the Americans are present because it's strategically very, very critical for them to leave this region exactly for the Russians.
Some experts and leading US politicians, so to speak, and columnists are saying that the White House does not have a strategic vision on its relationship with the Middle East. There is no strategic direction what that relationship should be. There is a conflict that it's no longer a geopolitical relationship, rather it's calculated financially.
Well, that's because of many factors. The first factor is President Trump himself. He's someone who looks at things in a very calculated financial way.
He's a businessman.
He's a businessman.
Yes.
We had this discussion, this talk here in the studios before his election, and I said, when you asked me about his relations with the Chinese, for example, I said he's talking to the Chinese as a businessman, and he knows when to be kind with them and when to be hard and very nasty, if we say, with them. So I think that the State Department is a very organized department with some projects about the Middle East and every region. I think that the realistic person in all that is President Trump. He's more realistic. He knows very well that there is chaos. And chaos in the Middle East changed all the dimensions now. Syria is not Syria of yesterday. Iraq is not Iraq of Saddam Hussein. Iran now, today, after the assassination of Soleimani, will be totally different than Iran before. This is the Iron Man who disappeared in a shot of one missile. I think that also Saudi Arabia is not in the same Saudi Arabia before. The game changed totally. There are only two forces on the ground, Russia and the United States. And I think that he's more realistic about he doesn't need any strategic planning for it because chaos now is everywhere. The United States had always Turkey as a major ally. Now Turkey is making all the nonsense that we can ever imagine, allying with Iran, with Syria, allying with Iran, Russia, and then getting along with the Americans again. So, and having very bad relations with the EU and NATO. So it's disorder, it's chaos. And I think that Trump understands that it's at that moment you can get the amount of money that you need with the simplest way. There is no force on the ground.
How would you describe the Iranian-American relationship? Some say there is more to it than meets the eye.
The Iranians, as I always said, since the Shah times till now, they have one rule in their conflict: never fight a war on your own ground, outside. That's why they fought the Americans now in Iraq. They will fight the Americans again and elsewhere in the region. We have seen the test, what we have seen about the attack, the missile attack against the Americans, how it was very well calculated that it won't harm any Americans. They didn't wish to see their army humiliated in a war with the Americans, because the Americans will have to respond, and the response will be very harsh. So I think that the Americans also do not wish to see the Iranians disappear from the scene, because they are playing a role. First of all, yes, like Saddam Hussein, they represent a threat to the Gulf states. And the second thing, they are the allies of Russia. So they do not really wish to trigger this conflict with Russia. So they're trying to also play a major role with the Europeans by showing them, if you will have a nuclear deal with them, it could go away, because we decided that it won't be there. Today, Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, said, well, let's forget the nuclear deal, let's call it the Trump deal.
Yes.
And
will they go for the Trump deal?
I don't think that the Europeans have any options. They are very weak now in all these conflicts. Whether France, Germany, or Italy, they don't really represent a real presence in the equation. Today they said, yes, we will act against, in 15 days, we will trigger the sanctions again if Iran won't act. That means it's a Trump deal, what Boris Johnson called it. So I think that Iran is a playground for political and strategic playground for the Americans.
Will Iran allow it? Since initially you said they do not allow any battles to be conducted on their land.
Iran, what is at that moment that we're speaking, there are still demonstrations in the streets. They're controlling it. They are oppressing the people there. The Basij, which is the paramilitary force in the streets, are capturing the young demonstrators and putting them into the jails. So I think that Iran is in a very, very difficult situation. They do not wish any problems with anyone. They said it. They said, we do not wish to see escalation. And escalation means for them losing some influence in the region. Because in a twinkle of the eye, you can see the Houthis diminishing, the Hezbollah being threatened, and even all they have gained in Syria could be lost. So they know very well that the situation is very shaking for them, but they know that there is rule to abide with the superpower, which is America.
Will the situation with Iran calm down? Because we've seen this Iran wave that rises and then things tend to calm down. Or is this time going to lead to some kind of a confrontation?
I think that now after the assassination of Soleimani, Iran has become a punching box, a punching bag. I mean that the Americans will try to humiliate them, slap them on the face again at a certain time. The big test was, if anyone would have told us the eve of the assassination of Soleimani that this man and the Americans will kill him. You saw all the trends on Google and on the social media, World War III. Everyone thought that there will be an atomic explosion in the world. What we have seen is nothing. So I think that this was a test why the Iranians are protesting, not only because their air defenses shot a civil plane full of Iranian scientists, by the way, 147 young Iranian scientists.
Well, this was their retaliation, and they said it was a man-made mistake.
Exactly.
Human error.
He said, well, the head of the Revolutionary Guard, he said, I wish I was dead with these people because I couldn't imagine that we could make that mistake. It's 147, the elite of the Iranian young scientists studying in Ukraine were killed by the Iranian hands. So it's a total chaos inside the Iranian house. So anyone who would like to humiliate the Iranians now, they will do it. And now the Iranians said we killed 80 of the US servicemen. And then the next day said, well, we didn't wish to kill anyone, we didn't kill anyone. Lies are being now exposed by themselves. So I think that the situation is not about calming down, it's about the humiliation of Iran, how they will stand against Saudi Arabia, how they will go on threatening Israel or even threatening Egypt's presence in the Red Sea. They cannot anymore be present except one thing, is the lightning terror attacks against any Gulf states. And this will be about America's role if they will let it be done like it was. Well, it was done in Aramco against the oil fields or not in Saudi Arabia. So I think that Iran now is a very critical situation. The worst thing it was the Ukrainian airplane, because it showed the people of Iran that in the moment of crisis, they don't have a strong army.
Israel is creating other vibes. It is threatening to kill Hassan Nasrallah. Will they go ahead with this? And what will this lead to? I mean, here we're talking about a serious clash with Hezbollah.
Look, the problem of the Iranian presence, whether through Hezbollah, whether through Houthis, whether through the militias in Iraq, the Hashd al-Shabi, the popular mobilization, or even in Syria, the greatest mistake that the Iranians made, it was depending on one-man show, General Qasem Soleimani. This man, when he disappeared, the equation changed dramatically. And there is a huge problem now, is that the Israelis at the beginning said, we are not related to this assassination, but we stand with the Americans. Today they said, well, there was some info that we gave the Americans about Soleimani's movement, and it helped assassinating him. So I think it comes again in the same circle that I've just mentioned, is that there is a shaky situation inside the Iranian house. Of course, Nasrallah could be targeted any moment, especially because there is also demonstrations against the presence of the political presence of Hezbollah inside Beirut now, and young people again. So the demonstrations are changing the dimensions in Iraq, in Lebanon, and inside Iran. So I think this is very critical for the Iranians. So now the timing of getting rid of Hezbollah or Hassan Nasrallah is just a matter of timing. The Americans said about General, the Israelis said, the head of the Mossad said before Yossi Cohen, he said that General Qasem Soleimani, that is before his assassination, he said he's not on the fame list, the prestigious list of assassination, but he will be soon on the list. So I think now they are controlling the situation, whether the Americans, the Russians, or the Americans or the Israelis. I think now that Hezbollah has to have a stronghold within Lebanon. The Sunni there are not very happy with him. They think that he is a branch of Iran, and the Sunni there are pro Saudi Arabia. So I think that his power is diminishing. It's not like 2006 when he faced the Israelis, everyone.
Is this a beginning of fragmentation?
For the Iranians, you mean?
For the situation in Lebanon. I'm not talking about...
the situation of Lebanon is always in fragmentation. The problem that is uniting the people now is money. There is no currency. There is no food in the streets. So the people are just united because there is a huge crisis. But once there will be financial aid to any part of the country, of course there will be fragmentation. But I don't think that the Americans or the Israelis or the Russians would like to see any chaos in Lebanon, because Lebanon now is, they're gambling on one thing, that they could get rid of Hezbollah with their own hands. If there will be a total revolution and Hezbollah will have to fight inside Lebanon, inside the Lebanese house, this will be the death certificate of Hezbollah.
Will Iran allow this?
The problem is that Iran has to protect itself in the inside now. They cannot allow or not allow. The fact, I repeat again, the fact that Qasem Soleimani was killed in that way, it's not an American mistake, rather it's a huge humiliation for the Iranians, because this man was one of the most important elements of the equation in the Middle East. The disappearance of this man will change dramatically the situation for the Iranians.
You think they don't have the second runner-up, because those organizations usually do not rely just on one person. I mean, there is the second. I mean, the ideology and the mentality and the work is carried on regardless of who is sitting in the seat.
There is two elements. The first thing, the mentality of, I won't call it the Iranians, but the Ayatollahs there, and especially people like Qasem Soleimani, they always fear the second man. So they always got rid of the second man. They don't allow it. The second thing is that Rouhani, who is considered as someone moderate, Qasem Soleimani was the runner-up for the next election as the strong man. If they will need someone in front of Donald Trump one day, it could be Qasem Soleimani. And the third element is what we have seen in the retaliation and the total chaos. It doesn't seem that there is someone there. It could take time, yes, but the person that will rise up, I think that the Israelis, the Americans, and maybe the Russians also, and inside Iran, won't let him shine like that in a moment. There will be an internal fight between the leaders there, to whom, because Qasem Soleimani was a follower of Khamenei, and there is people inside the Supreme Council who are against each other. So every man has his own men, and it won't be the second. So he was always there ensuring that the people who are under his command are not that strong like him. That's like in the mafia.
Have you noticed that whenever we talk about the situation in the region now, there are so many boiling points that we don't talk or address the main problem, which is the Palestinian question?
Yes.
And sometimes I wonder, personally speaking, I wonder if what is being created, the vibes, this negative energy and the boiling points are in a way continuously being created in addition to weakening us, but primarily maybe to make sure that this question stays buried. Or am I too pessimistic in my reading?
It's about, I will address immediately the main problem within the Palestinians is Hamas. General Qasem Soleimani, when he was assassinated, the next day Hamas and Haniya, they made this big ceremony trying to get the condolences from the people of Gaza for the death of the man. This is a true insult for Saudi Arabia, for the man who orchestrated attacks against the Syrian people, also orchestrated attacks in Lebanon against the Sunnah in Yemen, and the man who always, he played a role also in the 25th of January here in Egypt in some of the opening of the prisons. There was a cell of Hezbollah.
That's why I'm saying, why are we surprised?
Well, that's why I'm saying that taking this action, defending this man, is dividing the inside house of the Palestinians again. Always say, we are Arabs, we are fighting one enemy. Now they're saying, we are pro-Iran. And let me tell you something, yesterday, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, he was giving a press conference, and guess what? Behind him was the flags of all the staff of the Iranian forces, including Hamas flag. And the forces.
Why is all this surprising us? I mean, when the Brotherhood was here in Egypt, it was not working in the interest of Egypt, or yes. I mean, they worked adamantly and with huge strides in attempting to fragment and destroy the Egyptian rank and file. Why are we surprised? And why are we always looking at them as representatives of the Palestinian question? Because they're not the representatives. I mean, we have a presidency, we have Fatah is the official party, so to speak. Why are we always deviating to the Hamas issue? Because this is what Israel is also
exactly. It's an excellent remark, an excellent question, because they are giving the pretext. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of the Israelis. If we are in their place and you have an enemy, and one of the parts of the enemy is launching rockets on you, you will always tell the international community, see, they are the bad guys. If there's,
is it always launching rockets on them?
There is also the Jihad Islami, who's pro-Iranian. The problem with the Hamas now is this sector is full of arms, and it's a boiling situation. We know that the people are suffering inside.
How come the arms are not being used against the enemy? And here I'm not propagating violence, but I'm saying that we don't see arms used against the occupying force, but used against civilians in various countries. State-of-the-art technology. Even here in Sinai, some of that technology was leaked at some point through our tunnels, killing innocent civilians, really. How come out loud you say this is the enemy, but in reality, you're not attacking the enemy?
Because the people in command, they are not the real people who are in charge. I mean by that, these arms come from financed by Qatar and Turkish intelligence officers. We know that Turkey and Erdogan are always slamming Israel, attacking Israel verbally, but they have excellent economic relations with the Israelis. And the Turks are very, very keen to harm Egypt, not to harm Israel. So and Qatar, the same thing. Qatar, when it gives a penny to the Hamas, it's not to fight Israel, it's to fight Egypt. And we all know that when our prestigious army and our heroes were fighting in Sinai and still fighting at that hour and paying martyrs, and our blood, precious blood, is being spilled also on the soil of Egypt, but we are protecting our sovereignty. We know that those people who were captured, many of them were Turkish officials, Turkish intelligence officers, and the money were raised through the computers that we have seized. Of course, these are intelligence info, but some of the computers had all the spending, the money who came through transfers from the banks from Qatar. So, answering your question, because the people who are financing, arming, and giving the directions to these terrorists are people who have good relations with Israel. They're not interested in the Palestinian question, and they're focused on destroying Egypt. That's why we have this problem, and the flag is a Palestinian flag.
But while that's why I'm saying that whenever we discuss the Palestinian question, we always hang on Hamas is hampering that question.
Yes. I'll give you
there is an official representation, and it's not Hamas.
I know, but the problem is that Hamas has become the media preferred actor about telling the people biggest prison in the world, biggest open prison in the world, look how many kilometers and all these population are in there. Egypt is closing the borders for them and not allowing them to go and have the sick people to go to hospitals. Oh, they need food. We all know the investments of the Hamas people. So in the media is trying to make that. Exactly. Al Jazeera, even the Arab conscious, Al Jazeera is not talking about Mahmoud Abbas Abu Mazen, it's talking about Haniya.
Yes.
The websites, the social media who are pro the faction of the Muslim Brotherhood are talking of Palestine is Hamas. They're calling themselves the resistance as if the others are traitors, which is not. So the problem here also is not only the arming, the financing, it's also the media and the social media. So it's about propaganda. The propaganda is playing a huge role in it. That's why I'm saying that the Arab media have to be focused totally on Ramallah and on the Palestinian Authority as the only representatives of the Palestinians. And I think that repeating the rumors that the people, yes, the people are suffering there, but it's not because of Egypt. The people are there suffering because the people who are heading in the Hamas are very wealthy. You know, of course, the tunnels, how they were an excellent investment for them. We all know that the tunnels, there were all the trafficking. Even Egypt's fuel was transferred at the time of the previous regime. We all know what was taking place. All the goods were going there, and the money is in the pockets of the Hamas leadership. So answering your question is also about the media. The media has to focus on it, because the people, when they read any news about the Palestinian conflict, they read only about Hamas. No one is talking. We all know what is taking place inside Gaza more than we know that's taking place inside Ramallah.
Yes. The situation in Libya. Now this is another boiling point at our western border. Okay, now we shifted from east to west. Not that it's any better.
Welcome to the Middle East. Well, I'm not for the conspiracy theory, but maybe it's a way to strangle Egypt, because we will talk also about Sudan. So we're having every...
I'm moving sort of clockwise, anti-clockwise with the borders.
Exactly.
So we move from east to west, and then we'll go south, but definitely.
And the Mediterranean was the Turks.
Definitely, it's not getting any better.
It's the circle around Egypt, as you can see it.
Yes.
So that's why I'm not saying conspiracy theory, because some people said you're always pro conspiracy. Well, it's on the facts now. You can see it. It's boiling in Sinai. It's boiling in Libya and in Sudan, and of course we know what's taking place in Eastern Mediterranean. Well, what is taking place in Libya? It was very, very well studied by the Egyptian leadership. We knew that at a certain time the Turks will cease the conflict about the gas fields and shift it to Libya. So that's why we endorsed politically and democratically Field Marshal Khalifa Haftar, who is the head of the National Libyan Army, to liberate the major cities in Tripoli, the major cities in Libya, from the hands of the mercenaries, the terrorists, and I precise mercenaries because they are not Libyans. We know that there were Syrians, there were even Egyptians and other nationalities being gathered, and now the Turks are saying in front of everyone they are present. They are not Libyan people. The Libyan people are in the national army behind Khalifa Haftar, defending their sovereignty and trying to liberate this land. They're trying to portray again in the media, through Al Jazeera, that Egypt is waging this war. This is a huge lie, because Egypt, from the first day, is calling for the sovereignty of Libya, the respect of the Libyan people. And guess what? The Turks and the Turkish President Erdogan said it clearly, we are sending forces. And he signed this accord with the illegal representative of the Libyan people, Faiz al-Sarraj, who now has been dismissed by the Libyan people. And I want to say the Libyan people, I mean by that the Libyan parliament. They don't recognize this man. He has no authority to sign any accords with the Turks. And how come they violate the international community, international waters, and drawing a line between Turkey to the shores of Libya? This is nonsense. This is against the international law. This is against Cyprus. This is against Greece. This is against Egypt. Thank God, Field Marshal Khalifa Haftar made a significant advance inside Libya. The mercenaries are being encircled. We all know that the people in Tripoli are standing behind their army. I think that now they're trying to gain some time, the Turks. When they said they were sending forces, they said, well, now we're sending experts, so it's not forces. They said about contingent, meaning more than 100, it's now 35. Well, I think that things are changing on the ground, because Egypt was very clear. As our sovereignty is a red line. Our economic territory in the region is a red line. I think that also the defense accords between the Arab countries could be triggered at any time, as he thinks, Erdogan, that NATO is behind him because Article 52 or 57 could be very helpful for him. Well, we have also Arab accords between Tunisia, who refused to harbor the mercenaries sent by Turkey. Well, about that, Tunisia, who has a position very pro-Muslim Brotherhood, when they heard about the Turkish forces coming, they were happy, and then they discovered there was no Turkish forces, they were mercenaries, and they said no.
You cannot pass by.
Yes.
Tunisia and Algeria both said that.
And Algeria said, we are refusing by any ways. This is the failed Turkish diplomacy. I think that the game is not, has not ended yet. I think that Egypt now has shown with its military presence in the region that we are capable of changing all the equation in a matter of days. We are not making propagandas. Everyone saw it in the videos from our armed forces. We are very well prepared. We don't need any escalation. We don't need any aggression. We are there to protect our sovereignty. It's according to the international law. That's why President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is having all the bilateral connections with Trump, with Putin, with Macron, with Merkel, and with Conte in Italy. We are telling all the world, you are witnesses of what's taking place. And General Khalifa Haftar is the representative of the people of Libya. He went yesterday to Moscow, and the man decided, without any pressure, not to sign the ceasefire because he discovered there was a trick about it in order to maintain the mercenaries. I think that Khalifa Haftar would have negotiated a ceasefire if those who were fighting him were Libyans. Maybe he would have said, well, let's spare the blood of the Libyan people. But he discovered, like everyone, that the people who are fighting against the national Libyan army are not Libyans. They are mercenaries. That's why he said, no, I will protect my country. And I think that this is a patriot man, he made the right decision at the last moment.
Sudan.
Yes.
Today, as we talk, there were quite rough clashes in Khartoum.
In the airport, yeah. Well, the initial reports is that the former head of the intelligence apparatus there, who is pro al-Bashir, gathered some of his people and tried to occupy Khartoum International Airport and try to destabilize the situation inside Khartoum. I think that things are calming now, but nothing is being confirmed. The airport is being closed. The head of the army is present in Juba in South Sudan also to monitor the situation. I think that the Sudanese people do not wish to go back to the previous regime. So if there will be clashes for many days to come, I think that at a certain time there will be a proper resistance from the people themselves, and they will be behind their army. It's the same scenario as what's taking place in Libya. So I think that someone is trying to pressure Egypt in a way or another, making the same thing, that the armies are being triggered into civil wars. So I think that Egypt is very aware of this. We are trying to monitor the situation very closely. Of course, we respect the sovereignty of our brothers in Sudan, and we wish to see all these operations being terminated quickly and without spilling any blood. But I think that there is a strong planning of destabilizing Sudan, and it's serious. And let's wait and see for the coming hours how things will be dealt with.
Just came to mind, we have what, 22 Arab countries? Out of the 22, I think I can safely say, and very optimistically, that at least a third have serious problems. And when I count the third, I'm not including other countries that do not have problems but have battles, like terrorism battle, like an economic battle. I'm not counting countries that have decided to turn on their brothers, for example. I mean, this is not in the third. I'm talking about the third, whose land has been fragmented, whose land is being used as a battlefield. Situation in Iraq, Yemen, Syria, Libya. I mean, these are Sudan. I mean, this is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about countries that have serious and grave economic and terrorist issues. I'm not talking about countries like that. I'm talking about countries at war. At least a third.
Of course, yeah.
And that makes me wonder, should we continue that way? and I know it is in other parties in the region to see us that way. What will be the geopolitical map? And here I'm talking about to the professor of geopolitics. How do you see our geopolitical map 5, 10 years from now? Should we continue? And the reason I'm saying continue is because the boiling points, which started, for example, in 2011, believe it or not, this was 9 years ago.
Yeah.
9 years have passed in this chaos, in this constructive chaos.
Yes, yeah.
And nothing has, I mean, those who managed to survive, like Egypt, for example, unfortunately, we're one of the very few. And we have other kinds of battles. I mean,
Yeah,
we have Sinai that was turned into a merry-go-round for terrorism, for example. I mean, we have the other battles, the economic battle that we have. But how will we look 10 years from now?
Well, there is a say that says history repeats itself. Well, we have seen in 1915 Sykes-Picot Accords dividing the region. It was a French mandate, a British mandate, and everything was changed on the map. There were countries that were not there, they were being created. And then we have seen in the 1970s the emerge of the Gulf countries. So I think that the masterminds of these maps are again trying to mastermind some new maps. And they're trying to see who is capable to maintain. At a certain time, and they saw that the Ottoman Empire was present, so they kept the Sykes-Picot Accords, and then they said, let's see what Kemal Atatürk will do. And then they got rid of the Ottoman Empire. So I think that we are living in the same thing. I think that in the coming 10 years, things will change dramatically, but unfortunately it will be through blood. And this is the destiny of this region. We in Egypt, in order to be present now in 2020, we paid a heavy price with the blood of the civilians, the army, the police. We have seen that. So I think that same thing will be in the region. I think that the sectarian card is very, very present between Iran and Arab countries. I think that the Iranians are very proud of themselves, and they see that this wealth in this region could be theirs. So that's why they're saying clearly we do not see an escalation with the Americans. The problem between Iran and the United States, or Iran and Israel, is who will control the Arab wealth and the Arab countries. It's not about hatred between between the two camps. No. So I think that what we will see is a remapping of this region. They're trying to make Egypt play all its cards now. And we are very, very keen not to play it. We have plenty of cards, but from my, as you asked me, as someone who is in the field, for instance, the French used to tell me, we all know that Egypt one day want to control the eastern part of Libya. And I said, we never said so. And they said, no, we know. So they want us to push us to play this card, to send your forces to control this part. That means that there's some mapping in their head that Egypt will take this part, and maybe one day we tell you, well, you're taking the oil fields in Libya and controlling this part, why not give up some part of Sinai for the Palestinians? Now it's like
you're shifting.
Exactly, like a puzzle.
Moving the country.
Yes,
westward.
moving the country. It happened, that's why I'm telling you, history repeats itself. It happened before. Why not it will happen again? Syria and Lebanon was the great Lebanon. Then there was Syria and Lebanon. The Gulf states, there were plenty. It was the Arabian Peninsula and Yemen. And then Yemen was divided, and that's all the Arabs. The problem between Saddam Hussein and Kuwait was what? He said it's, historically Kuwait was part of ours. So this continues to be present like that. The Iranians, they say we are Persians. We had all the eastern part where there's the oil, it was ours, including the Emirates and Bahrain. So I think that remapping now is the great deal. They called it the deal of the century, but I think now they're coming back into the order of order will be created through chaos. And now we're seeing the chaos. The fact that Libya is trying to stand again, this is a new dimension. Playing the card of the Berlin conference in January 19th, the next January 19th, in 4 days or 5 days. It means that there will be the new international conferences that we have seen after the First World War of remapping the Middle East. So we are living again this episode. The one question, who will resist till the end?
That is a very, very big question and to the point, let's put it that way. Unfortunately, our time is up. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us this evening. I'd like to thank you, the viewers, and we'll wish you a very pleasant evening, and we'll see you same time next week. And good night.